Stephen Meet again, Bullseye Guy podcast coming to you. Boy, the world's moving fast, but not as fast as guys on an NFL football field. You'll understand what I mean by that in a minute. We're going to talk to Kingsley Smith. We're going to get the background of Kingsley in terms of everything from news and politics to sports right now. I've actually been at a football field, and I'll talk about that when we get there. It's an amazing experience when you see how big and fast these guys are. Kind of like what's going on in the world right now. Things are moving fast and furious. Excited to have you, Kingsley. I know you guys have a bunch going on today is an understatement, but introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and history.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It's a real pleasure to join you today. And, I always enjoy talking with you because we have smart conversations and we don't take ourselves too seriously, but we certainly seem to find the right things to talk about. And so I look forward to that today. I have, at the NFL, I'm with the NFL Network and I've been there for the past 6 seasons. You don't mark your time there like, I've been at I was at IBM for 10 years. No, at the NFL, it's marked in seasons.
Yeah.
But before I was with the NFL, I spent over 25 years working in local television news, primarily with Fox owned and operated stations. And that took me all over the country, from Dallas to St. Louis to Philadelphia and out to Los Angeles, where I am now. And so I really got to see this whole transformation of the industry. When I went to work at a station in Dallas, Texas, it was a CBS affiliate owned by Times Mirror, KDFW Channel 4. And that was in 1993, 92, 93, somewhere in there. And think about that, Times Mirror, who owned the LA Times and a bunch of other stuff, they had a bunch of TV stations. And that's when newspapers were, they were just cash cows. They had these TV stations that were even bigger cash cows, and they sort of put them all together. And there was one in St. Louis and one in Birmingham and Austin and Dallas, and there may be a couple more. But, ultimately, when I left that TV station in 2006, it was a Fox owned and operated station. So the affiliation had changed and the ownership had changed 2 or 3 times. And that was really emblematic of how the media business was changing. I mean, when I worked there was no internet, there was no email, all that, none of that stuff existed then. And you take it for granted now. It's just crazy.
Yeah. And let's talk about that, because growing up, you were in the South. What was your early interest in? Was it in news? Was it sports? How did you sort of start down the news career path initially?
Well, it's interesting. When I was in college, my family had a lot of business, a lot of work in the oil and gas business. And I thought I was going to be in the oil and gas business. I was going to be a petroleum landman, do something. I got a Bachelor of Science in geology. I was heading down that path. Well, I graduated from college in the late 80s. And there's no oil and gas business. It had tanked. I mean, the price of a barrel of West Texas Intermediate crude was under $5. That had brought down the banking industry in Texas. And the sort of the dominoes that fell after that because of the oil industry going bust. And listen, the oil industry going bust is not new. That happens all the time. So it makes it interesting.
Yeah.
But I had to find something else to do, because people who were in the oil and gas business for a lot of years and out of work, I wasn't going to find a job. And so I pivoted into journalism. And part of that was driven by the fact that my grandmother, Betty Marsh, she born in Duluth, Minnesota, but she graduated from the University of Missouri in Columbia, journalism degree. And she was the first female reporter at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch to have a byline. Before that, they would have women who are reporters, but you didn't get a byline. You could write the story and it was either incorporated into somebody else's byline or, from various reports, that sort of stuff. And the reason she got it, she was able to negotiate it because she had a pilot's license. And she learned to fly around World War II. And she was part of this group that would move planes around the country.
Wow.
And she had a pilot's license. And so she could fly to Joplin. She could fly to Kansas City. She could fly to Columbia. She could fly all around Missouri. And she said, listen, I'm going to bring the stories back if I get a byline, great, we'll do the story. If not, I'm going to go find somebody else who'll recognize my work. And so she was the first reporter at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch to have a byline. And they listed her as reporter. And that was, it was a big deal. And so that was, I always sort of knew that was going on. And that was, if nothing else, just an inspiration to me to say, you know what, take a look at journalism. But, you know, things started very interestingly. My first job, I worked 2 days a week. I worked Saturday and Sunday. Brand new TV station in Jacksonville, Texas, KETK, Channel 56, an NBC affiliate. And my job was to literally print the scripts and sort them into colored piles and give one to the director, one to the anchor, one to the producer, and one went to the teleprompter. And that person had to tape them together. And you ran them through this whole belt thing. It wasn't computerized. And took a picture of it that projected it on the screen for the teleprompter. And then during the show, I had a stopwatch and I timed it. And I'll tell you right now, you put a gun to my head, I couldn't keep time.
Yeah.
It was I didn't understand it. Nobody explained it to me. And we had to be done on Saturday night in time to start Saturday Night Live at 10:30. And I don't know how many times we'd get done and I'd do the math. And I'd go, uh-oh. And the director would go, wait, there's no uh-oh. There's no uh-oh. And I said, we're going to come back and the Saturday Night Live will have started. You can't miss the top of Saturday Night Live. I mean, that's right. The opening skit. It's kind of important. But I did that once. And the general manager of the TV station called me up and said, that's it. You do it again, you're out. And so I learned to time after that. Yeah. And ultimately got more, just through attrition, was able to do more work and got more jobs and started producing, and away we went.
So was your interest initially more in the reporting side? Because as a producer, explain the difference. A producer and a reporter aren't really the same function. You're still in news, but totally different functions.
It really is. And for me, I never really considered being a reporter. And I was always curious like a reporter, and I always worked on stories. But I never wanted to work for a newspaper. I never wanted to work in the print business. And I didn't really have the drive to go and be in front of the camera and develop that. Now, I will share with you, I've got a secret desire to have my own radio show one day.
Okay.
And so maybe we could do something with that. I'd like to, put some of your blockchain together and buy us a radio station.
Maybe there might be somebody we know, there might be a spot to fill.
That's exactly right.
I'm hoping might be one.
I'm hoping on September 15th, there's an opening. Anyway, I think that once I learned what a producer did, because in college, the minor, I had a Bachelor of Science in geology, but the minor was in journalism. It was all print journalism. And so once I got exposed to what the TV stuff did, then I kind of became self-taught. And I sought out some different people to teach me what was going on with how to be a producer and how to sort of prioritize what the news was and work the stories and develop angles and work with reporters. And I had several people that were just invaluable to me, that really helped me understand it and believed in me and gave me the opportunity to do it. And
as a role as a producer, because if it's news, it's daily news. What were the top two, three things, what were your daily tasks? So you're like, every day, these things had to be done in order for the news to be out on time.
We would sit there, we would have an editorial meeting in the morning, and we would kind of figure out, okay, who's doing what? What's the stories of the day? And it doesn't matter whether you're in Tyler, Texas, or Dallas, Texas, or Philadelphia, or Los Angeles. It's the same thing. You just have more people doing it. And you kind of figure out what the news of the day is and what are your reporters out there digging up? What are the enterprise stories that are going on? And then you kind of fill in with all the other news that's happening, and you have different resources to provide that. You had at the time you'd get, different satellite news services that would provide stuff to you. And we'd get news from around the state, and we'd get news from the state legislature or the state capitol, or you'd get news from other cities that were going on. But you had your local news that you generated. And it's, at the core, it's money, health and safety, education. That covers it all, I had somebody to tell me one time there are three basic stories. Every story can be put into the three basic buckets. Boy meets girl, girl meets boy. From here to there, or the search for treasure.
Huh.
And that covers just about everything. And so once you kind of understood what the stories were, then you just sort of put them in order in a show.
So I have a question for you about news in general.
Mm-hmm.
There's a saying, and I'm sure you've heard it. The saying is, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yep.
However, when you talk to people, they complain about the news being overtly negative. But then I also know people who've tried to launch news networks like the Good News Network, so you've got this conflict of, pain and drama and discord. People complain, but they don't go anywhere where it's all good news. Have you seen that or have thoughts on that?
You live with it. You live with it. It's why PBS is always begging for money, because commercial television stations that sell advertising and live on ratings, you got to generate interest. And you can have a lot of different stories, but that city council meeting on a tax abatement for an air conditioning manufacturer that's coming into town is just not that interesting.
Yeah.
But if you can tell me about, the crazy guy that robbed 3 Stop and Shops on the south side of town, and I've got pictures of it,
that's why I said it has to be
more
fascinating as a producer, because you're led by stories that are going to be informative, but also you need to generate interest and ratings and things like that. And
right.
It seems like there's this conflict.
It's a huge conflict, and it's very difficult to find the right mix of the right balance. And that conflict only got more difficult to balance as you move from the 90s into the 2000s and beyond, where publishing became more prevalent everywhere. The internet changed everything, and you had a greater competition for viewers' attention.
Yeah.
And now, there was a time that the NBC station in St. Louis, KSDK, Channel 5, they would do a morning show during the 80s, especially in early 90s. And that morning show would get 65 to 75% of the audience. And it was just this juggernaut. And it was just, they were printing money. It was crazy. And now that same TV station that was loyal, that people that was their station, KSDK, is now, if they get 15% in the morning,
yeah,
they're overjoyed. It's more likely 5%. And
yeah.
it's nothing against them. They're a really good TV station. They have a great history, a great legacy, and they're important to that market. And I never worked there. I just watched them. They are a great TV station for many, many reasons, but the market changed. And that's a market. St. Louis is a market where people watch TV.
Yeah, it was
LA,
always my joke when the
internet
internet started. My joke always was WWW stood for whatever, whenever, wherever.
Right.
Because that ability to consume information. That's also why I think a lot of the newscasts always try and end on a positive story.
Yeah, the kicker. It's called the kicker. The other thing that quickly became apparent to me as a producer was the value and the how to handle live situations, because that's the one thing that you just can't replicate anyplace else.
Yeah.
The newspaper might have more reporters and be able to put more boots on the ground, to cover a story, but we're the only ones who are going to be able to cover it live. And weather coverage, growing up in the Midwest and the South, tornadoes, hurricanes on the Gulf Coast, those became very big drivers, and you realized how they spiked ratings. The equivalent out here in Southern California, the car chase. Remember when they were everywhere? It's because they drove ratings.
Yeah.
But live coverage makes a difference, and that's so much of what I build my shows around right now at the NFL is whenever we can be adjacent to live games, it's a huge deal. And so once I understood the value of live coverage versus just telling you what happened that day. I mean, there was a time you'd see smoke out on the horizon, or you'd see a car crash, or you'd see something, and you'd go, well, I'll tune into the news at 5 o'clock and see what that was about. And that's long gone now.
Yeah.
Or you get a weather alert, or the skies turn dark, and you're going to kind of look at things. Weather's a big driver. And so when you realize what live coverage can bring and what it can do, that really changed the way I produced stuff. And there are really some big events that drive that. Election night, big one. Leading up to the campaigns leading up from that political sphere. Remember the Branch Davidian fiasco?
A little bit.
Yeah. And what happened, that Sunday that the ATF raided the compound, there's video of the whole thing. A TV camera was there. It wasn't live, but what you got back was something that felt live and looked live. And then for however many days, you were live outside that compound watching as the FBI tried to negotiate with David Koresh and the Branch Davidians. And ultimately, you saw live on TV, they torched the place. They burned it down.
Let's use that as a good transition, because unfortunately today, I'm not going to give the date, but the live TV stuff going on right now is around the clock, Kabul and Afghanistan, and some really, really challenging things. But for live events, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, is NFL and the penultimate Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about the transition when you moved from news to the NFL. What were the expectations? What was different? What's been most surprising?
The biggest driver for me was sort of looking ahead and realizing that while local news is still very profitable and very important, it's lost its influence in my mind, and is, I don't want to say we're a buggy whip company, but it's becoming a lot different.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was an opportunity to say, okay, let's find another act. And the NFL presented that opportunity for me. And so now I don't really have to worry about the news as much as I get to just produce a show. And the NFL Network has its own news department, and I'm not a part of that. I'm in the production department. And so I run a show called NFL Total Access. And we get to put together each day stories about football. And we look at different storylines. And like the storylines right now are, who's going to be playing quarterback for certain teams when they start the season?
The Bears.
Bill Belichick, the Bears. Yeah, Bears fan. Yeah. I tell you, you got Justin Fields. He's really good. He's really good in my mind. And I've never played the game, but I got a lot of people that work for me that do play that have played the game. And they all say, man, how do you put Andy Dalton out there when you got Justin Fields? Or how does Bill Belichick keep Cam Newton on the field when you got Mac Jones? We just saw Joe Burrow's going to start for the Jaguars. Poor guy. I think he's going to have a tough season. It's going to be a long season. That team's not good, but they'll get there. And, the Cowboys have got their quarterback coming back, new quarterback in Los Angeles. And so you look at all these different stories, and what I'm able to do now is pick the ones that I like, work with the producers to create ways to tell those stories to viewers. And we create digital versions of them. We have a podcast for our program that we do. We have different social media parts of it. So we slice these stories up in many different ways, some thinner than others, and we share the content across multiple platforms. And that's what really drove me, is the opportunity to really flatten it out and take a TV show that had been with the network since it started and now really expand it into much different areas.
And that show's a daily show. What time's it on?
Daily show. It's on 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific, all year round. It's one of 2 shows that airs on the network year round. And it's an hour. During the month of August, we air around, because we had like 23 live preseason games. And so we air the program around those preseason games. But once the season gets going, every day at 7 Eastern, and we're on for an hour and we have a lot of fun.
So it sounds like, Kingsley, it might be the same thing. Do you have a morning production meeting? Do you have a storyboard and a list of stories, and you pick which ones and things like that?
We do. We have an idea of who's good. We have our host, and we have different analysts, former players, who join us each day. And they're scheduled, and we have other reporters, or insiders, as we call them, that join us each day. And then we kind of, each day starts with a production meeting in the morning that lays out everything for the network. Here's the news, here's what's going on. And then our team will get together and really focus in on what we're going to do that day, and the stories that we want to cover. And we lay it out ahead of time. We know that, on every Wednesday, we're going to be doing an interview with Kurt Warner, the Hall of Fame Super Bowl winning quarterback, and he's going to talk to us about something. So we plan for that. And we know every Friday we're going to have something about, the picking games and looking at the analytics around games. So we have certain benchmarks that we have every day that we plan for.
And so what is the different driver then? Because if the driver for news is, again, clicks, and if it bleeds, it leads, which I don't like saying, but it's that sort of negative drama. Is the show driven by drama, intrigue,
all of the above?
Positivity? What?
Yeah, all of the above. We work for the league. We are owned by the NFL. The 32 owners are our boss. So first of all, you've got to recognize who's the boss.
Yeah.
And as opposed to working for a large company like, Comcast or Sinclair, or, so we're owned by the league, and the league, it is their sandbox. One of the things that we follow is we always protect the shield. Now, we're going to be honest with people. We're not going to lie. We're not going to be disingenuous. We're going to be transparent, but we also will remember that we protect the shield. And so other outlets may put something on the air, and we look at that and say, you know what, that's not who we are. That's not about us. And we are football. We celebrate football. We celebrate the fans who watch football. We celebrate the game and those that have played it, past, present, and future, and the fans that invest in it, that are part of it. And as long as that's our through line, as long as that's our true north, then we're very successful.
So let me ask you a question that it's not meant to be controversial. It's just, if the production meeting were tomorrow and the conversation were around vaccines, right? The NFL's been talking, because we're still, some people, COVID, in and out of COVID. There's conversation around mandatory vaccines, not taking it. Is that a topic you would tackle or not tackle, or would you tackle and let the players give their side, or would you protect the NFL's position? I mean, because it's a timely one, but it's also a little prickly.
It is, and you have to be smart with it. And so we've talked about vaccines, and we've talked about vaccine policy, and we've been very clear to share what the league's policy and position is. Each week we have an interview with the chief medical officer of the league, Dr. Alan Sills, and he talks to us about how the league is handling this situation. We've been doing that for over 18 months. And we also talk about how some players don't necessarily agree with the vaccine policy. Just this past week, we talked about how the Minnesota Vikings brought in one of the leading epidemiologists in the country and had him speak to the team. Huh. And we heard from the coach, who shared what that person talked about. And as the coach said, listen, at the end of the day, it's a personal decision, but for us, we think it's important, and we think that this information, it will be of value to our players.
Yeah.
We're not out there to necessarily celebrate those that might not agree with the policy, but we don't hide from it. And we also know that the policy is one that was worked out between the league and the Players Association. So they're in conjunction on that. And so there are two sides to that. It's not just the league, it's the league and the union that represents the players.
Yeah, the Players Association and the PA, yeah.
So those types, you know, and listen, last year, when this country was going through a very serious, you know, social and racial reckoning, and really examining what was going on, the league was a part of that, and we didn't hide away. You know, we didn't shy away from that. We had, but we put together a series of roundtables with a lot of different voices discussing what the league has done, what the league should do. And it's always from a football perspective. We're not out there to provide social commentary in general, but we didn't shy away from what players thought was important, how different things were addressed previously and how they could be addressed going forward. And that led to a lot of different initiatives that the league has put forward that falls under the umbrella of called as Inspire Change. And so we have a series of stories that we air that the league provides us to help educate the league and the public on what's going on with Inspire Change. We just aired one this past week about economic opportunities that in grants, you know, money that the league is giving out through their foundation to help people. So it's not, we don't try to put everything through the proverbial rose-colored glasses. We recognize that, but we also, at the end of the day, celebrate football. And it's the reason it's the #1 sport in this country. There's a reason that it's followed by millions and millions of people each week, and we want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that.
And so for the next season, we've got, with COVID, we had a gap year. So what's this season called? Is it 2021 season?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
So for the 2021 season coming up, what are some of the big changes that you think are going to happen around a couple things? Everything from COVID restrictions for events up through streaming and distribution. Will live events come back? Just give me a couple kind of closing points of what you think this next year will be like.
The league has been very clear with the Players Association on protocols for health and safety. And so that's going to continue to be a guiding force. And the health and safety of the players, the fans, the team personnel, I think will continue to be, if not the #1 thing, right next to it, 1A and 1B. And I think that there will be there's already a push to make sure that teams understand the rules. And the rules are very specific, whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated. And that's going to be a big factor this season. I don't know how yet, but I think it's going to play in there some form or fashion. The teams are planning on having full stadiums. And I don't think that any of the jurisdictions are going to necessarily get in the way of that, but you don't know. But right now, everybody's planning on opening up to full capacity. Some are having a little bit more restrictions when it comes to that you need to be vaccinated. Some are even offering vaccine sites and vaccine opportunities at the games.
Yeah.
And so they're doing what they can to have a commitment to the community and help the community when possible, and maybe even incentivize it a little bit if my word, not theirs. But set that aside, you're seeing the game being distributed through multiple platforms like it's never been before. You can watch games through the Yahoo Sports app. You can watch games on NFL app, NFL.com. You can watch games in a lot of different places. NFL Game Pass has never been bigger. That's a wonderful product. Next year, Thursday Night Football is all on Amazon. It's going to be an Amazon Prime event solely, Thursday Night Football. And so that's a huge change. And I think that's going to have an impact. You're seeing, we do shows now on every possible platform. The NFL Media Group, on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. There's shows that we do out of the UK that we produce here in California for NFL UK. There's, if there's a way to distribute it, we're doing it, both live and prepackaged.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating. I'm going to leave you with one question, and because of your position, you possibly can't answer. Prediction for who's going to win the Super Bowl.
My Super Bowl prediction is I think you will see the Kansas City Chiefs back in the Super Bowl this year.
Okay.
I think they'll be there 3 years in a row, that team has only gotten better. On the NFC, I think my heart wants the Dallas Cowboys to be there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to distinguish between your heart and your head.
My head thinks that Aaron Rodgers has had an off season to develop this big chip on his shoulder, and it would not surprise me in the least for Green Bay to get back to the Super Bowl. I think it's going to be really hard for the Buccaneers to get back there again. It's just so difficult, and injuries can be a problem. Their team is a little bit older, but my dark horse, if I were to give you a dark horse right now, on the AFC would be Buffalo, and in the NFC, I'm going to say my dark horse would probably be New Orleans.
All right. Well, I'll check back with you and we'll see. If Kansas City makes it, I'm fine. I noticed my Bears still aren't in the prediction cycle, but maybe they'll get there in the next decade or two.
I think the Bears have found their quarterback. I think the Bears are about to be on a really good run.
I hope so. And I hope you are as well, Kingsley, for the show this year and the NFL and all the great stuff you're doing. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Steve Mead, the Bullseye Guy. Thanks so much. Tune in again next week.